enough. That is Michael Myers bullshit.
Rather than come straight out, sure. That's fine. And then we'll just keep it going.
That's better than much better.
Is that right?
Do you have permission to shoot?
Well, just a few words about Halloween from the creator.
I think the best thing about Halloween is the script of Halloween. I think without the script, there's nothing could be done. I think we got this writer, what's his name?
Daniel something.
Daniel Ferens. I think he did an excellent job. Excellent.
The journey to making Halloween 6 would be almost as ugly as its production. After the chilly response to Halloween 5 from both critics and audiences, the sequel becoming the least profitable film in the series to date, Mustafa Akkad chose to put the franchise on a brief hiatus, hoping to have enough time to develop a truly worthy next chapter in the Myers saga, but also wanting to distance the next entry from the failure of Part 5. Akkad felt that Halloween 5 had betrayed the themes and tone of Part 4, its eccentric director veering a little too far off the beaten but lucrative path, and moved to bring his sequel trilogy full circle. In 1990, Halloween 5 producer Ramsey Thomas introduced Akkad to an up-and-coming screenwriter named Daniel Ferens, who had managed to share with Thomas several of his unproduced horror movie screenplays. Thomas, seeing potential in Ferens' talent, arranged a meeting. The Rhode Island native was a self-proclaimed horror movie superfan, and then just 21 years old, and was eager to contribute to the mythology of one of his most cherished genre properties. According to Ferens, he would spend weeks preparing for what appeared to be his big break in the industry, and would arrive with a notebook stuffed full of extensive research on the series, including a complete franchise timeline, character bios, and even a Myers family tree. Ferens carefully broke down for Akkad his vision for moving the franchise forward, using the Mark of Thorn as his primary jumping-off point. While Akkad was intrigued and hopeful that the project would get off the ground right away, unfortunately for Ferens, a major obstacle was about to put the brakes on his Hollywood dreams. Shortly following the release of Part 5, the film rights to the Halloween franchise expired, a strategic financial move by Mustafa Akkad, and what would follow would be a vicious bidding war between two giants of 90s horror, New Line Cinema and Dimension Films, owned by Miramax. New Line already owned the Nightmare on Elm Street film series and was about to acquire the Friday the 13th rights as well, and it wasn't long after the contentious bidding began that original Halloween creator himself, John Carpenter, threw his hat into the ring. Seeing an opportunity to not only regain creative control of his past intellectual property, as well as help a studio unite three of the genre's most iconic boogeymen, Carpenter partnered with New Line Cinema in the early 1990s to rally additional support for their bid. However, Mustafa Akkad responded by opting to team with Miramax and Dimension Films' future-producing juggernauts Bob and Harvey Weinstein instead, who would ruthlessly pursue the franchise rights, ultimately winning the bid just before the company was acquired by Disney in June 1993. Dimension would continue to produce all films in the series until 2018's Halloween reboot from Blumhouse. At the time Halloween 6 was being developed, the Weinsteins weren't exactly the powerhouse Hollywood siblings they would later become, and would simultaneously produce Wes Craven's 1996 slasher blockbuster Scream, which would soon after skyrocket them to A-list status. Halloween 6, however, would not.
So what do you think accounts for all this drama? Those facts are, if they're irrefutable...
I probably account for the drama.
Right.
You know, I think it's Fahrenheit 9/11. Right. It's my personality.
Right.
You know what I mean? We should probably retire me somewhere and let Bob, you know, just do it, you know, make oodles of money, and they can all just make oodles of money somewhere.
Harvey Weinstein would display similar behavior over the course of the film's production to what he would later become feared for, namely relentless harassment, bullying, and generally shady tactics. This would be most evident in his and the studio's treatment of series star Danielle Harris, who would be all but tossed aside by the studio. But the move from a more independent production to the greedy corporate culture of studio filmmaking would forever change the tone of the franchise, not only in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well. And the film would also be released in a time where the slasher movie genre appeared to have fallen into a slump, moviegoers exhausted by the onslaught of guy with a knife chases people storylines brought on by the 1980s. But it would invariably be a potent cocktail of incompetent leadership, a money-hungry studio, and a classic case of way too many cooks in the kitchen to make the making of Halloween 6 a complete and total clusterfuck.
Making all the room bright. If you don't do it right, what a terrible fright he will give you when he comes.
Michael Myers was 6 years old. He stabbed his sister to death. For years he was locked up in Smith's Grove Sanitarium, but he escaped. And suddenly, Halloween became another word for mayhem.
Don't tell me. Your name is Joan. Joan of Arc, and you're also hearing voices, right? Now, who's coming?
Michael Myers.
This force, this thing that lived inside of him came from a source too violent, too deadly for you to imagine. It grew inside him, contaminating his soul. It was pure evil.
Runes are a kind of early alphabet that originated at about 500 BC. They were symbols carved out of stone or pieces of wood used in pagan rituals to portend future events and invoke magic. Among the ancient druids, thorn represented a demon that spread sickness, brought death to hundreds of thousands of people.
What makes you think he'll come back here?
This house is sacred to him. He has all his memories here, his rage.
Hello?
We want the child.
Who is this?
sinking ship. Oh, God, hurry, we have to...
Hello, dear.
Ah!
Following the legal battle for the soul of Halloween, now under the rule of Dimension Films, Akkad and his partners hit the ground running on moving the sixth film into pre-production, joining with NIGHTFALL Productions to help further finance the project. Akkad again began pursuing the perfect writer to revive Michael Myers and bring fans back into cinemas, and it was momentarily rumored that the Weinstein's golden boy, writer and director Quentin Tarantino, then hot off the success of 1994's Pulp Fiction, was set to write the long-anticipated follow-up. However, in reality, very early on, Tarantino was used as a kind of surrogate for the studio, tasked with guiding and approving ideas for the sequel and relaying them to Miramax and Akkad. At one point, Evil Dead 2 writer and Intruder director Scott Spiegel was brought on to revise a script in which Michael was written as a homeless man, a concept Akkad despised, and that would later be explored in Rob Zombie's 2009 sequel boot, Halloween 2. However, Spiegel, as well as Tarantino, wanted to throw out this initial premise in exchange for something, as always, closer to the original. Unfortunately for Spiegel, Akkad wanted to go in a different direction, and dismissed the filmmaker from the project, also effectively ending Tarantino's unofficial involvement. Akkad would spend months meeting with countless writers for the project, and would see an influx of scripts of varying quality. However, his path would yet again cross with that of the young and eager writer he had met years earlier, Daniel Farrens. And Farrens would eventually convince Akkad to hand him the job. In June 1994, racing against an October 1994 start date, seemingly just throwing out all those years Akkad supposedly spent re-evaluating the series' potential, Farrens began work on a totally new script for Akkad, primarily hoping to unite the first two films with the previous two sequels, and, simultaneously, expand the story enough to warrant further entries. Farrens would base his idea on a minor detail from 1981's Halloween 2, in which the Night of Samhain, there pronounced Samhain, is referenced. Samhain, of course, being an ancient Gaelic festival which celebrates the transition from the harvest season to winter, and would again introduce the idea of a druid cult into the Halloween franchise. The plot of Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, also revolving around an elaborate druid cult sacrifice. Additionally, the original 1980 Halloween novelization by author Curtis Richards also references druidism and suggests that Michael's family has a history of supernatural influences. But still, Farrens took one step further. What if this cult was responsible for Michael's insatiable appetite for death and his apparent immortality, in effect, manipulating the shape for their own benefit? Farrens would attempt to tie Myers' annual killing sprees to Samhain, and imagined the thus far undefined villain, the Man in Black, as a high-ranking agent of the cult, with Farrens also rewriting Haddonfield history and implying that the cult had operated in the town for decades, including at the time Michael suddenly began killing. In earlier versions, the entire town itself was in on the conspiracy, but Akkad thought this would make a better standalone story for the inevitable 7th installment, and would, obviously, later drop that idea. Farrens' original untouched script was much moodier and more unnerving than what would eventually end up in cinemas, and often described as gothic, and shook one of the producers so much that they claimed they had lost sleep after reading it. Farrens would reportedly churn out a total of 10 to even 11 separate drafts of the script between June and October of 1994, a tension-filled 4-month process that would leave the film's writer, director, and producers completely at odds. Fun fact, Farrens jokingly changed the film's official title from his original conception, Halloween 666, to The Curse of Michael Myers, as an in-joke referencing the film's seemingly cursed production. However, the prank backfired when the producers decided that they loved the new title and officially made the change. Director Fred Walton, at the time best known for his 1979 thriller When a Stranger Calls and 1986's campy slasher April Fool's Day, was briefly considered to direct the film, but talks quickly fell apart, and he soon exited the project. While other younger genre filmmakers were courted for the role, including a pre-Lord of the Rings Peter Jackson, it would be Chicago-based filmmaker Joe Chappelle who would inherit the reins.
A word from the director.
The word is...
No more pages, Danny.
No more, no more. Mr. Negative.
Mr. Negative.
In the mid-1990s, filmmaker Joe Chappelle was known only for his poorly received 1993 independent thriller, Thieves' Quartet, and was seeking his next project when contacted by producer Paul Freeman, the studio looking for a younger and lesser-known creative voice, because that totally worked out last time. With time running short and both Akkad and the studio liking the up-and-comer's vision for the sequel, Chappelle was handed the job, but would work under close supervision by Freeman and the studio.
Ready, set, and action.
The budget was set at $5 million, which was $1 million less than Halloween 5, but the same amount given to Halloween 4. Initially granted a $6 million price tag by Dimension Films, the studio heads were growing nervous about the ever-ballooning cost of another horror movie sequel in the works, 1996's Hellraiser Bloodline, and chose to cut Halloween 6's budget to offset the expense of that production. Filming would officially begin in late October 1994, and principal photography would last well into the winter of 1995. It would again be filmed almost entirely in Salt Lake City, Utah, at this point known just as much for its religious foundations as it was for being Michael Myers' stomping grounds. While Halloween 5 had been shot in the spring, filming in the dead of winter was a risky endeavor for Dimension Films that, surprise, did not pay off, shooting having to be postponed or relocated multiple times throughout production due to heavy, often unexpected snowstorms. Many exterior scenes also having to be rewritten or reshot to be interiors. In fact, the script would be subject to almost daily revisions by director Joe Chappelle and producer Paul Freeman, at times even rewriting shot to shot. Original screenwriter Daniel Farrens receiving no warning and no explanation from the producers, and the theatrical cut's entire ending would be written without any of Farrens' input whatsoever. But we'll get to all of that later. Paul Freeman, who had been a producer on Halloween 4, seemed the perfect fit to directly oversee the production. However, Freeman's infamous mishandling of the sequel would not only lead to an uneven shooting schedule and all-around on-set chaos, but the producer even once sent the crew home early just before a planned crucial shot, and was reportedly also fond of frequently deleting pages from the script, even though shooting for those scenes was already on the schedule, and was also known for indiscriminately rewriting dialogue and action beats, and would ultimately put himself in charge of second unit photography and sole supervision of the post-production process. As a result, the production of Halloween 6 would be driven into a state of irreparable chaos, leading to what would become a filmmaking nightmare for the studio, and a bitter struggle for the future of the franchise. Filming on the sequel wouldn't finish until just a little over 1 month before its release. On a dark and stormy night, a now teenage Jamie Lloyd gives birth to a baby boy at the hands of a mysterious cult. Jamie escapes with the infant, but Michael, as always, isn't far behind. She finds refuge in a bus station where she calls into a local radio program, calling out for Dr. Samuel Loomis.
Not dead. Just very much retired.
Michael soon catches up with her, however, and delivers a gruesome end for our former lead protagonist. Loomis hears her cry for help, as does Michael Myers survivor Tommy Doyle, both still residing in Haddonfield. Tommy finds Jamie's baby at the station, and Loomis arrives shortly after, Tommy taking responsibility for the child and choosing to name him Stephen.
In fact, in Halloween 5, Danielle Harris returns as Michael Myers' young niece Jamie, who is still trying to find a way to escape from the boogeyman.
Michael Myers terrorizes me by chasing me into a field, my boyfriend getting hit by a car, running through a pine forest, running through a regular forest, and then getting hit by fireballs almost.
Perhaps one of the greatest sins of this film was its exclusion of former franchise star Danielle Harris, aka Jamie Lloyd. In the years following the production of Halloween 5, Harris and her family had moved to Los Angeles in order to further support her acting career. Harris had also grown closer to the Akkad family, spending most of her summers at their LA home, frequently asking Mustafa Akkad when the next sequel would begin shooting. As the years passed, however, Harris more or less forgot about the prospect of starring in another entry in the franchise, and soon found work in other films instead, delivering a standout performance in 1991's Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, as well as winning several recurring television roles in popular 90s sitcoms. However, in late 1994, something curious came across her agent's desk. A casting sheet from Miramax Dimension Films in search of a young woman of Harris's description for the role of Jamie Lloyd in Halloween 6. Reportedly, Dimension Films had initiated a casting call for an 18-year-old actor to fill Harris's shoes, and were even brazen enough to use an actual headshot of Danielle Harris for reference. Confused, Harris and her team reached out to the Akkads and the Weinsteins, who explained that they were seeking an 18-year-old actor in order to avoid having to grapple with child labor laws, Harris being only 17 years old at the time. However, Akkad pushed for her casting on the actor's behalf, and the reluctant studio finally agreed to allow Harris in the role only if she agreed to be legally emancipated from her parents, therefore allowing them to treat her as an adult. A lengthy and expensive process. After some consideration, Harris and her family agreed to move through the courts, and thousands of dollars, and several months later, Harris received her legal emancipation and re-won the role. And then she got the script. Her character, now pregnant, was set to die violently in the first act, despite earlier drafts having Jamie survive through the end of the film, a fate not too different than that of Ellie Cornell's Rachel Carruthers in Halloween 5. And the studio's business affairs department also now wanted to pay Harris the same salary she had been given at the age of 12 in Halloween 5. The last straw came when Harris turned to the studio for financial aid in paying back her hefty legal fees, and they declined her request, telling the young actor that she was, quote, a scale character, and that they couldn't provide her with any more money, seemingly indifferent to her place in the franchise or her value to fans. By this point, it was just days before shooting was set to begin. The young actor was both shocked and hurt by such a callous response, and at the advice of her agent and family, she chose to walk off the project the day before the start of principal photography. And despite promises from Akkad and writer Daniel Ferens to make everything right, Harris wouldn't hear from the studio again for over 20 years. In the final film, Jamie is played by then working actor J.C. Brandy, who, just to be clear, shares no blame for the fiasco. Brandy was originally featured more in the film, with 2 deleted scenes further expanding upon Jamie Lloyd's fate. One scene depicting Dr. Wynn, who we later discover is the Man in Black, of course, kidnapping Jamie and artificially inseminating her with Michael's seed. And lastly, and perhaps most notable, an expansion of her attack by Michael. While in the theatrical version she is killed, a scene was shot showing her surviving the brutal assault, but later being killed anyway by Wynn back at the hospital. All of this unused footage, however, would end up in the famous producer's cut of the film. Brandy would be quickly cast in the legacy role following her first audition, and the blue-eyed actor would have to wear brown eye contacts in order to further resemble Danielle Harris. A wig was also considered to bring her closer to the look of a young Jamie Lloyd, but the producers decided against this. The gorier shots of her death scene would be added during additional photography, the first cut of the film toning down the violence for a more psychological mood, something Brandy later regretted. Brandy would also experience hypothermia as a result of filming many of her scenes in the wet cold, but stated that she still looks back fondly on her time on the film. Kara Strode, now living with her dysfunctional family in what just happens to be the old Myers house, is beginning to grow concerned about her son Danny's strange nightmares and drawings. After being warned by Dr. Loomis of Michael's return, her mother Deborah is axed by the shape. And Kara finally connects with Tommy, her creepy across-the-street neighbor, and learns that Stephen may be at the center of an ancient druid cult conspiracy surrounding Michael Myers, and warns that she and Danny may also be in danger. Local DJ and total pig, Barry Sims,
I bet she wears crotchless panties and barks like a dog,
hosts a Michael-themed Halloween bash in Haddonfield Park. And meanwhile, John Strode loses his head in a shocking demise. Sims is also quickly taken out by the shape. And later, after witnessing her friend Beth being killed by Michael, and discovering her brother's body, Kara and Danny are pursued by the shape, and soon find themselves in the hands of the druid cult. Loomis's friend Dr. Terrence Wynn revealed to not only be its leader, but the Man in Black himself. Even dear old Mrs. Blankenship is in on the plot. Writer Daniel Ferens had written the character of Dr. Terrence Wynn, aka the Man in Black, specifically for the late veteran actor Christopher Lee, who had famously been John Carpenter's first choice to play Dr. Samuel Loomis, and regrettably turned it down. However, the prestigious actor was unavailable, and longtime character actor Mitchell Ryan was eventually awarded the part, producer Paul Freeman being a fan of his performance in 1987's Lethal Weapon. Ryan came with over 100 acting credits to his name, spanning nearly 4 decades, and would also appear in the Stallone-starring comic book adaptation Judge Dredd that same year.
Okay. Playing Kara is, I hate to sound sycophantic, but I'm honored to play this role because it's so rare that there's a character written for a woman in her 20s who's actually soulful and deep and smart and has cerebral energy going on.
Good morning.
And it's just like she's like a Shakespearean character. She goes through this incredible arc, and I just love her.
Actor Marianne Hagan, Kara Strode, would make her feature film debut in Halloween 6, and has continued to find steady work in both film and television in the decades since, as well as theater. However, the slasher movie sequel is still what she is best known for today. The film also features a strong supporting cast of mostly unknown working actors. Kara's best friend, Beth, played by Mariah O'Brien, the actor originally auditioning for the role of Kara Strode, and Keith Bogart portraying Kara's brother, Tim Strode. O'Brien would later reveal that she had no idea that her character would be seen topless in the film, and was only told about this when she was first offered the part. O'Brien eventually accepted the role, of course, but wanting to maintain her professional integrity, agreed to only shoot the scene at a certain angle for a predetermined amount of screen time. Character actor Leo Getter had earned small roles in films of varying popularity throughout the 1980s and early 90s before earning the role of wild Haddonfield disc jockey Barry Sims.
Crotchless panties and barks like a dog.
Interestingly enough, Getter would be the only actor from the film to later reprise his role, again playing Sims in the 2005 independent horror film Penny Dreadful. The filmmakers of that production intending the character to be a direct homage to Halloween 6. For Kara's ill-fated parents, Kim Darby would be cast as Midwestern mom Deborah Strode, the prolific actor of film and television, now primarily in retirement. And Bradford English would play abusive father John Strode, the role the actor is still most known for. Janice Nickram was a Salt Lake City-based actor who came with little professional experience when she won the role of sweet old Mrs. Blankenship. Nickram would go on to appear in 13 other film productions following her debut in Halloween 6, working until her passing in 2013. Kara, Danny, and baby Steven are kidnapped by the cult, and Loomis and Tommy sneak into the sanitarium to rescue them. Tommy breaks Kara out in the nick of time, and they locate Danny and the baby, but Michael thwarts their plans and also viciously massacres a group of cult doctors. Tommy and Kara make their escape with the children, Michael still hot on their trail, and Tommy manages to inject the shape with corrosives, weakening him enough to be beaten to death. Or so he thinks. The four drive off into the night, Loomis choosing to stay behind. Michael's mask lying alone on the laboratory floor. Fun fact, an abandoned hospital sitting in the outskirts of Salt Lake City, in an area known as the Avenues, was used to double for Smiths Grove Sanitarium and was also rumored to be haunted, cast and crew members attesting to several strange occurrences during filming, making it the second Halloween sequel in a row to have a spooky production. Mustafa Akkad was not a fan of the unique mask used in Halloween 5, and would set out to create a face for Michael closer to the first film. No surprise there. The mask would be handcrafted by makeup artist Chris Robbins, under the supervision of late special effects creator and horror movie legend John Carl Buechler. The mask would be based closely on the mask featured on the poster for Halloween 4, not the mask that appears in the final film, I mean. Robbins would shape the mask to perfectly fit the head of stuntman and actor George P. Wilbur, who once again reprises his role as Michael from the fourth installment. Robbins would also subtly incorporate hues of burnt sienna and other earthy colors to create soft hints of the mask's facial features on the rubber itself. The intention being that no matter how the light hit the mask, it would always look like Michael.
No, well, I had to be in it because it's my character, and I've been in all of them except Halloween 3, which was a diversion from the story. And so naturally they asked me to do it, and I did it, and I'm doing it. And it's very enjoyable. And it's going to be a very good film. I think it's probably one of the best.
Donald Pleasence would unexpectedly pass away 8 months before the film's release, on February 2nd, 1995, the result of complications following heart surgery. Age 75 at the time of filming, Pleasence was already in poor health going into the production of Halloween 6, and is clearly much frailer than we had last seen him in Part 5. Despite this, the actor felt an ownership over the role of Samuel Loomis, and was determined to portray the restless doctor as long as possible. However, much of Pleasence's dialogue would end up on the cutting room floor, director Joe Chappelle finding many of the late actor's scenes to be boring and felt they weighed down the pace of the film. Despite this, though, Pleasence would receive top billing on the sequel.
My name's Paul Rudd, and I'm 5'10".
You don't really believe this crap about Myers still being alive.
Michael's work isn't done in Haddonfield, and soon, very soon, he'll come home.
Then unknown actor Paul Rudd was not the producer's first choice to embody the return of Tommy Doyle, the series' first male protagonist. The studio first seeking out original Tommy Doyle actor Brian Andrews, who, by that point, had left acting altogether and had no representation as a result, making him very difficult to find in the pre-social media dark ages of 1995. Rudd would find even bigger exposure in 1995 with the release of the now cult favorite teen comedy Clueless, which he would audition for during the filming of Halloween 6. And although it was released ahead of Halloween 6, the slasher sequel would technically mark Rudd's feature film debut. Rudd later stated that when he first saw the film, he thought it was so terrible that he felt embarrassed and feared for the future of his career, and would avoid discussing his involvement for many years, especially as his industry profile began to rise. However, decades later, Rudd now feels proud of the fact that his first film was a Halloween sequel, and has attempted to attend several recent fan events, and had even been tapped to reprise the character in the next film from David Gordon Green. But alas, those Marvel contracts have kept the lovable actor pretty busy these days. The returning character was originally intended to be tied more closely to the 1978 film, writer Daniel Farrens even infusing flashbacks into his earlier scripts, but many of these character moments were lost in the shuffle. According to Farrens, he had even intended to have Tommy become the new Dr. Loomis, assuming the role of the wise mentor and warrior against evil in the future films, feeling the series needed a Van Helsing-type character in order to continue properly.
Come with us.
No, I have a little business to attend to here.
The ending of Halloween 6 would see numerous revisions throughout the writing process, including an ending where Michael slashes Loomis's throat, and another where little Danny, played by newcomer Devin Gardner, takes a similar turn as Jamie Lloyd at the end of Part 4, killing his mother, Kara Strode, and Loomis again finding the aftermath. And also a finale where Tommy places a bomb in Wynn's escape helicopter, blowing him to pieces. Ultimately, they went with what would become the ending of what is now called the producer's cut, but a little more on that later. Sadly, this would not be the last time the film's climax would evolve. Freeman's perceived incompetence at the helm forced the studio to intervene, the Weinsteins going on to manage the production directly, leading to over 1/3 of the film, nearly all of Freeman's added material, having to be completely reshot. Freeman was obviously dismissed from the project, but would go on to produce the next 2 films in the series. Mustafa Akkad and his son and producing partner Malik would adamantly disagree with the new additions and studio takeover of the production, and would have no further involvement with the film once reshoots began. Original screenwriter Daniel Ferens would also have no involvement in the reshoots. With the departure of producer Paul Freeman, Halloween 6 was extensively reshot over the course of several weeks, under the close watch of Miramax producers. And Chappelle and Dimension Films were finally able to breathe a sigh of relief that they had somehow salvaged the seemingly doomed production. Then came the test screenings. The Curse of Michael Myers would undergo several audience test viewings in New York leading up to its wide theatrical release, reportedly attended by much younger fans of the series. And the feedback was generally not flattering, viewers taking issue with the film's final confrontation between Loomis and the Shape, as well as other key aspects of the film. Devastated by the response, Miramax saw no choice but to order yet another round of reshoots, which would take place in late summer of 1995, moving the production to Los Angeles in order to save costs. However, there was one big problem. By this point, actor Donald Pleasence was no longer alive. To circumvent this little bump in the road, Pleasence would have to be replaced with a body double, and it's more or less unnoticeable in the final film. Sadly, Pleasence would not be the only actor to be recast for the additional photography. George P. Wilbur, who finally got his second chance at playing the Shape after being passed up for stuntman Don Shanks in Halloween 5, would once again be replaced for the film's reshoots. Joe Chappelle, like Dominique Authen-Girard before him, feeling the actor looked too bulky in the costume, and felt he could salvage what he could with a new performer. Stuntman and actor A. Michael Lerner would wear the mask for the remainder of reshoots, recommended by his father, legendary stuntman Fred Lerner, who was also working on the film at the time. The final third of the theatrical cut featuring a noticeably leaner Michael. Wilbur would, however, continue to do stunt work on the film following his replacement, and even makes a cameo in the finale as one of the doctors who is slaughtered by Michael. Harvey Weinstein himself would be directly involved throughout the process of reshoots, collaborating with director Joe Chappelle and special effects head John Carl Buechler to push the violence of the film even further, hoping to shock audiences enough to make up for the film's more fundamental shortcomings. Other producers on the film reportedly resisted this idea. Nonetheless, several new shots of blood and gore would be added for the theatrical cut. The film would also undergo heavy editing in the weeks leading up to its world premiere, the studio hoping to slim the film down and quicken its pace, also wanting to give a more modern and flashy look to the edits, incorporating the very 90s flash cuts seen in the theatrical version, in addition to the frame distortions and strobe lighting added by Joe Chappelle during reshoots. This alternative cut resulted in a tense legal battle between Mustafa Akkad and the Weinsteins over which version should see the light of day. But the Weinsteins and Dimension Films, yet again, won the war, leaving the series' longtime producer alienated from his own property, and fans left with a hodgepodge of a Halloween movie. Series composer Alan Howarth would call Halloween 6, quote, a fix job, and would have what was by far his worst experience creating a score for the franchise. Director Joe Chappelle would give the fan-favorite composer free rein, and Howarth set out to utilize new technology that had developed in the years following his work on Part 5. Having what he referred to as a broader sonic palette. The composer would also use the film's introduction of a druid cult as an opportunity to experiment with different kinds of themes that had been heard before, but more or less keeping in step with the previous films. Howarth's original soundtrack featured an extremely minimalist approach to the music, a technique akin to John Carpenter's score for the first film. But the producers felt this approach lacked excitement, and Howarth was asked to incorporate more modern-sounding instruments into the score, sending Howarth back to the recording studio. Unfortunately, following the composer's work on the production, the studio still wasn't satisfied, and they next turned to music editor Paul Rabjohns to rework Howarth's entire sound design, without his involvement. Rabjohns would incorporate more atmospheric sounds into the film, as well as other popular sound effects of the time, attempting to further appeal to the MTV generation. Howarth was, naturally, jaded by his experience, but today is still honored by his work on the series. Howarth's official score would be made widely available with a CD soundtrack release from Verisay Saraband in late October 1995. Unusually, this edition contained music from both the original cut and the theatrical cut of the film, although Howarth personally aided in rescoring the first version of the soundtrack for the release. In addition to Howarth's music, were several songs from the Alabama-based rock band Brother Cane, featured throughout the film, taken from their 1995 album Seeds, released on Virgin Records. However, the alternative producer's cut would omit their contribution.
Murderous Michael Myers. Every day is Halloween, and he's stirring up terror again in Halloween 6. We visited Michael's playground and talked to his latest victim.
According to Daniel Ferens, an early teaser trailer for the film was released that showed the title as being Halloween 666, The Origin of Michael Myers, which was based on both his initial title for the film and also incorporated a title from a previous writer's submission. Of course, it would be advertised as Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers thereafter, in all territories, making it the first film in the series to not have a numerical symbol following its title. In addition to its US one-sheet poster, the film would see the commission of a very interesting Italian movie poster as well.
Michael Myers has come back to Haddonfield to kill.
From Dimension Films comes the return of pure evil, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers.
Premiering on September 29th, 1995, the film took second place at the weekend box office, losing to David Fincher's crime thriller 7, raking in over $7 million, making it the strongest opening for a Halloween film since Halloween 2. It would go on to gross a worldwide total of over $15 million at the US box office. While audiences seemed willing to revisit Haddonfield and the antics of Michael Myers for a 6th time, like its predecessor, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers would receive largely negative reviews, most critics citing the film's convoluted plot and mysticism as their primary grievances, others calling it bland and tired, and as always, the film would draw harsh comparisons to the beloved original. The film can also be seen in a different context today with the perspective of time, being heavily influenced by the slasher movie renaissance of the late 1990s and early 2000s. The film would have its home media premiere with a VHS release on October 7th, 1996 from Buena Vista Entertainment, nearly 1 year after its theatrical run. It would later make its DVD premiere with a bare-bones release in October 2000. And wouldn't see another iteration until a January 2010 Canadian Blu-ray release by Alliance Films, although it offered no special features. The film would soon after arrive on Blu-ray in the United States in May 2011 from Echo Bridge Entertainment, again without any bonus material. However, it would be the sequel's next home media edition that would finally give its complex history the showcasing it deserves. But first, let's talk about the producer's cut. The version of the film screened to New York test audiences became commonly known as the producer's cut among die-hard fans, who, thanks to the rise of the World Wide Web, would be able to connect with one another like never before. The producer's cut, titled Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, the A in Halloween noticeably forming the Mark of Thorn symbol, would feature over 45 minutes of never-before-seen footage, taken from the original work print of that cut of the film, including the original ending. The cut had slowly developed its own cult following, seeing bootleg copies appearing on eBay as early as the turn of the millennium, and eventually leading to online fan petitions for an official home media release. The producer's cut features numerous plot deviations from what was shown to moviegoing audiences. The original ending, while initially cut for lacking intensity, goes in a totally different direction from the official version. In the producer's cut, Kara awakens to find herself restrained to a concrete slab in Smith's Grove Sanitarium, ominously surrounded by the cult members, who plan on making baby Stephen the final blood sacrifice necessary for passing the evil of the shape to her son Danny, which is alluded to earlier in the film. In this version, Tommy holds Wynn hostage for Kara's release, and they and Stephen run for their lives, Tommy using the vague undefined magic of the Druids to stop Michael long enough in order to make their escape, with help from Dr. Loomis. The cut ends with Loomis unmasking Michael to reveal Dr. Wynn instead, Michael having swapped garbs and escaped. Wynn passes the Mark of Thorn to Loomis just before his death. Nearly 20 years would pass before this lost version of the film would see an official debut, seeing its first official public exhibition on October 27, 2013, at the New Beverly Cinema in Los Angeles, with writer Daniel Farrens in attendance for a brief Q&A. In 2014, fans' prayers were finally answered with the release of the aforementioned Scream Factory Anchor Bay Halloween box set, which not only provided extensive never-before-seen special features for Halloween 6, but finally included the legendary producer's cut as well, seen in an official capacity for the first time on home media in its newly revised transfer, again taken from the original work print. While personally I do find the producer's cut to be an improved version of the film, it doesn't repair some of the more fundamental failures of the script, and we are still left with a film that feels at odds with itself.
What I try to do with Halloween is I try to shoot it I try to give it a more sense of a style. Some of like when you get into sequels of these, you get beyond 2 and 3 and you're into 5 and 6, it's a lot of it sense when as a viewer, as someone who goes see these movies, it's like you just get a sense that they're just shooting the movie and they're just giving the people their decapitations, or just giving them like the body count. And what I try to do with Halloween is go back to giving it a sense of style and giving the whole movie a sense of air of menace.
It's tempting to blame the director for all of the problems a film may have. But on Halloween 6, Joe Chappelle would find himself at the center of a creative war between the writer and the producers. And the then inexperienced director would ultimately be given little choice but to play ball. Today, Chappelle is mostly known for his much more memorable work in television, most notably the critically acclaimed HBO drama, The Wire, as well as helming several not-so-memorable genre films. Daniel Farrens would go on to become an independent film producer and screenwriter, and has also transitioned into television. Farrens is alternatively known for having produced the nearly 7-hour-long Friday the 13th documentary Crystal Lake Memories, the complete history of Friday the 13th, which, if you haven't already seen, I highly recommend. Nearly every cast and crew member who has been interviewed claims that Farrens' original screenplay was a new classic and would have made for a fantastic Halloween movie. Sadly, this was not to be, and now Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, stands as an odd misfit in the series, which is ironic given the fact that Ferenc originally set out to tie everything together with this story. The film is choppy and at times confusing, and never manages to develop any kind of cohesive narrative. Perhaps a symptom of a script trying to do too much. Overstuffed with half-baked ideas and jarring retcons, the sixth Halloween sequel may not be as deceptively simple or as memorable as its originator, but no one can say they weren't at least trying to do something a little different this time around. So let me know your thoughts on Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. Is it a guilty pleasure or a terrible mistake? And would you like me to review the next films in the series? And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and click like below and feel free to share. And don't forget to find me on Patreon at /LeightonEversol, where you'll gain early access to my channel's content and more. And of course, if you want to see more videos just like this one, go ahead and click subscribe.
There's a spook in Tin Pan Alley, walking on the piano keys. He's a jiving go-to to make the most of his rhythmic tendency. So better watch out, someone's about haunting the town with new kinds of rhythm. You may meet the boogie woogie boogie man. Better beware, better take care, 'cause if you don't, you'll go along with him when you meet the boogie woogie boogie man. If you see him once, he'll really hex you. Yes, that man can really vex you. With his bass, he almost wrecks you. Put the boogie, better get wise, 'cause if he tries, he will soon have you beating his rhythm when you meet the boogie woogie boogie man. Don't be sure every night that you lock the door tight, turning on every